How's it, guys? Welcome back to Sit and Arbiter. My name is Gil, and on this channel we talk about South African law, how it is, why it is, and what it could be. Today's video is to ultimately ask whether South African law adequately protects victims of revenge pornography. So there's three things I want you to take away from this. Number one, what exactly is revenge porn? Number two, what are your legal mechanisms available? And number three, whether those legal mechanisms adequately protect victims of revenge pornography. So dealing with the first one, what is revenge porn? Okay, I think it's easier to start off with saying is what is pornography? And that the Constitutional Court did not give us a clear definition. In the case of Case, it was literally called Case. In that judgment, the Constitutional Court declared that it's not a criminal offense to be in possession of pornography in South Africa. But in coming to that definition, coming to that conclusion, they shied away from giving an accurate definition of what is pornography. And you know, justifiably so. When does something become porn? Is it the mere fact that people are nude? Probably not. Is it the mere fact that people are having sex? Probably not either. It's sort of the question is, when does something become PG-16 to X-rated? And it's weird because it is the sort of thing that you'll know it when you see it. You know you're watching porn when you see it. But it's not always clear at what point does it cross the line from nudity or sexual acts to the domain of pornography. So it's that divide isn't clear, which is why the court didn't want to say this is a clear definition of what is pornographic material. What it did say, besides saying that it's not unconstitutional to be in possession of pornography, it said that with the proviso that possession of pornography doesn't involve children and it doesn't exploit women. Okay, and I want to zone in on the exploiting women thing because that for me is what this revenge pornography sort of hinges on. Okay, so what is revenge porn? Revenge porn is sort of the situation where you've got two people that were in some sort of sexual relationship, and to spice things up, they sent sexually explicit photos or videos of themselves. Right, and when I talk about a victim here, I'm gonna refer mainly to a woman women in mind. Not to say that men can't be victims of revenge porn, but most likely and in most situations, it's normally involving women. So it is a female-centric problem. So when I speak of victims, just have that in mind of who I'm speaking about. Okay, so in the situation with the lovers, that, you know, one thing leads to another and people break up, and then you've got the situation where an ex-lover has your videos, and for one reason or another they feel hurt, they feel shamed, and they want to get back at you. And that's sort of the idea of why something is revenge porn. Right, they threaten to release your nudes. They threaten to say to do all these harmful things to you on the basis of you sending them that sexually explicit material when you were in the relationship. Right, and on that point, I also want to stress that this probably isn't necessarily only inclusive of what is revenge porn in terms of two consensual adults or who were consensual adults. It may also involve situations where there are hackers who hack into your phone and find this material. It also could include where people transpose, pictures of your face and put it on a sexually explicit body. Those are all situations that would, in my opinion, all amount to revenge pornography, even though it doesn't necessarily involve two ex-lovers, right? So on the basis that on either way, the situation is where a female is exposed to, is threatened to have her videos or her sexually explicit material exposed to the world. In my opinion, that is exploitative, and that is why, in terms of the case judgment, it doesn't offer any protection to people that are threatening to use this as sort of to using the revenge porn. There's no justification for using it because it is exploitative of women, right? So on the acceptance that it's exploitative and non-consensual, we then ask what are your mechanisms, what are your options as a victim, right? And I'm going to explain this in terms of two options. In my mind, there's a common law option and there's legislative options. So dealing with the common law, in my mind, there's two areas that you can rely on. Number one is defamation, and number two is the common law right to privacy. And as I'll explain, I think they can both give you the same remedy anyway. So dealing with defamation, there's 5 elements you need to prove, and that is the wrongful and intentional publication of a defamatory statement concerning the plaintiff. Right, the last three requirements, which is the publication of a defamatory statement concerning the plaintiff, it's understood if you can prove those requirements, then the first two, which is the wrongfulness and intention, is presumed anyway, right? So in asking whether something is defamatory, there's 2 questions we're sort of asking. The first question is, what is the ordinary meaning of the publication, which would obviously include videos and photos. What is the ordinary meaning of that? And number 2 we ask is whether that ordinary meaning is meant to belittle or humiliate someone, to say that they're not worthy of equal respect. And I think in terms of if we're talking about revenge porn, I think no doubt that publication or threatening to publish that sort of material is meant to belittle. It's meant to hurt someone, and no doubt it would be defamatory if it is subsequently disseminated or published, right? So that's in my mind, it would quite easily fit the definition of defamation. If we're speaking about in terms of the common law right to privacy, it has similar elements, similar 5 elements, but I want to zone in on, instead of saying what is defamatory, you ask is, did the person have a reasonable expectation of privacy? Right? A reasonable expectation of privacy sort of asks whether your belief in something is a private matter, whether it is objectively, whether other people would look at it and say, yes, that you have a reasonable expectation that those factors of your life or that personal information is meant to be private, right? So it is an objective test, and I think if we're speaking about, again, in terms of revenge porn, if you're sending sexually explicit material consensually to your partner, there is surely a reasonable expectation that you expect that person not to send that material to other people. It was only consensual to the effect that it was meant for one person and one person only, right? And therefore the threatening or the actual publication of that material would therefore amount to a violation of your reasonable expectation of privacy. So we've got here in terms of the common law is that in terms of both defamation and the common law right to privacy, I think there would be an infringement, and your remedies in terms of those two common law elements, 2 common law mechanisms, is that number one, you have damages, which is sort of a sum of money to say to compensate you for the harm and the hurt that you've gone through. And number 2, you can get an interdict to either stop someone from further publishing it, or you could also get them to remove it from whatever website that they put it on, right? So those are your 2 options in terms of common law. If we're going to move on now to legislation, there are 3, well, in my research, there are 3 main things that you would be able to rely on. The first, and I think most importantly, is the Protection of Personal Information Act, or the POPI Act. Importantly about the POPI Act is that it's not yet, at the time of filming, it's not yet in full effect. So we don't quite know how everything is going to work together. In theory, as I'll explain, there's protection, but we're not quite sure how it's going to work out in practice. So in terms of POPI, in order to be afforded the protection of the POPI Act, you need to have personal information, and you need to have, the material needs to be personal information. And in terms of the definition, it would include videos, it would include photos. So no doubt sending that sexually explicit material would be personal information. And a person that processes that information, whether they're storing it, whether they're sending it out, or just retaining it, they would then be regarded as a responsible party. And when you have that sort of situation, you as the victim, or the data subject, as the POPI Act calls it, you would be able to lodge a complaint with the Office of the Information Regulator. And once you lodge that complaint with the Information Regulator, it triggers the Information Regulator to have a wide range of legislative mechanisms. So what that information regulator is allowed to do, it suddenly says that they can investigate the matter, they can issue warrants of arrest, they can search and seizures, they have different enforcement mechanisms. The idea is they have a wide range of powers once you lay a complaint against someone for doing unlawful and wrongful process or unreasonable processing of personal information. If the person doesn't comply with the information regulator, that can therefore amount to criminal conduct as well as a claim for damages. Okay, so in effect, what I'm saying is that apart from damages, which we already can claim in terms of common law, we now have a criminal law element where someone can actually serve jail time for distributing the sexually explicit material that you didn't consent to, right? And importantly, I think the POPI Act gives you the widest range of protection, but I say that subject to the fact that we don't quite know how effective the information regulator is going to be. Only time will tell whether they can actually do what they say they can do in theory, right? So that's the POPI Act, and the last two, I'm just going to briefly mention them. There's the Cyber Crimes Bill and the Films and Publication Act, and both of them, Films and Publication Amendment Act, both of those pieces of legislation are not yet fully in effect, but one day when hopefully they would essentially do the same thing. They would criminalize criminalize revenge porn, sort of saying that it's sort of an online cyber form of sexual assault. Okay, so in terms of my point is, in terms of the common law and in terms of legislation, you basically have three things at your disposal. You have, number one, you have a claim for damages, different kinds of damages: patrimonial, non-patrimonial, aggravated damages. You have a claim of, you can get an interdict which prevents people from publishing it or forces them to take it down. And the third thing is you have criminal law implications. People can serve jail time or other sort of fines for distributing the revenge pornography. Okay, so ultimately we're going to ask the question now whether those three things that you can essentially claim for are going to be adequate protection for a victim, right? And in my mind, it has the potential, and importantly, I want to stress that it's got the potential to be adequate protection to compensate people, to punish people, and also to take down the material from the internet. For me, though, all this potential is meaningless unless the material can actually be removed from the internet. And we all know that when things go onto the internet, they're duplicated in many different forms. You send it to one person, he saves it on his phone. You send it to another person, she saves it on her phone. It gets sent to this website, to that website. It can go viral in an instant, right? And this, for me, isn't necessarily a legal problem. This is perhaps a technology industry problem, where if a court pronounces that certain material must be removed from the internet, how effective is the technology in actually removing it from people's personal cell phones, removing it from this website, from that website? How effective is the technology to do that? And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think we're at that stage where that can happen, at least not immediately. And the effect will be that victims of revenge porn are still going to be humiliated to the extent that this stuff still exists on the internet, despite getting an order for it to be removed. Right. Having said that, if we're going to speak about the legal protection, I think there's great potential, especially when the POPI Act comes into full effect, that it'll give you the framework for protection. But like I said, I don't think this is necessarily a legal problem per se. Right. So that's all I have for you today. Please like and subscribe. And like I always tell you, the law is only a tool. And like any good tool, its real effectiveness lies in the hands of those who know how to use it. Cheers for now.